At 16, Tiana Monroe was full of fire, too much fire, her mother would often say. Beautiful, stubborn, and drawn to danger like a moth to a flame, Tiana had long stopped listening to her parents. When she found out she was pregnant by a 21-year-old dropout who ghosted her the moment she told him, the tension in the Monroe house exploded. Tiana's parents, Helen and Darnell, were strict but loving. They pleaded with her to focus on school, to let them help raise the baby, but Tiana rebelled hard. She skipped school, cursed at her mother, came in and out as she pleased, and posted her growing belly all over social media like it was a trophy. By the time her daughter Amia was born, Tiana had dropped out of school completely. Helen stepped up and did most of the caregiving, rocking Amia to sleep, while Tiana partied or slept until noon. But 2 years of chaos wore the Monroes down. The final straw came when Tiana turned 18 and came home drunk, nearly dropping Amia in the hallway. That night, Darnell made the hardest decision of his life. He told Tiana she had to go. Tiana laughed in his face at first, thinking it was a bluff. It wasn't. She packed her things in trash bags and stormed out with Amia clinging to her chest. Helen cried and begged, "Leave the baby. Please, just let us keep her safe." But Tiana turned cold and sharp. "She's mine. Y'all didn't want me, you don't get her either." Living on her own was far from the fantasy Tiana had envisioned. The cheap studio apartment she rented with her welfare checks was barely livable. The heater clanked in the middle of the night like it was haunted. The wiring was a mess. Lights flickered and outlets sparked when she plugged in Amia's nightlight. She complained to the landlord, but he gave her excuses every time. Still, she refused to reach out to her parents. They called, often, left voicemails, sometimes just to say they missed her, other times to ask about Amia. Tiana either ignored them or picked up to curse them out. She had too much pride. "You put me out, now stay out," she'd say, even though deep down she was drowning. One night, desperate to feel alive again, Tiana decided to go out. She'd just gotten her welfare check, bought a new dress off clearance, and was itching to escape the noise in her head. She told herself she needed a break, just one night. Just one. She fed Amia, sang her to sleep, and tucked her in. Then she left. No babysitter, no camera. Just a locked door, a cheap baby monitor, and crossed fingers. At 3:47 a.m., a neighbor called 911. Smoke was pouring out of the building. The fire started from a faulty outlet in the kitchen, exactly what Tiana had complained about. By the time firefighters arrived, half the building was in flames. But a miracle happened. Amia's cries woke the upstairs neighbor, Miss Rhonda, a retired nurse who often heard the baby crying through the thin walls. Rhonda burst into the smoky apartment, coughing and stumbling, and scooped Amia from her crib before the flames reached the room. She wrapped the baby in a blanket and ran outside barefoot, smoke swirling around them like a ghost. Amia survived. Tiana got the call at 5 a.m. while half drunk, still in a club bathroom. When she showed up to the scene in smeared makeup and heels, the police were already waiting. She was arrested on the spot for child neglect and endangering the welfare of a child. The news spread fast. Social media blew up. The story of a young mom who left her baby alone while out partying caught fire just like the building had. The landlord was also arrested for multiple code violations and for ignoring maintenance complaints. But that didn't spare Tiana. At her arraignment, she broke down crying when the judge denied bail. Helen and Darnell sat in the courtroom, silent. They had filed an emergency custody order the moment they heard what happened. The system moved fast because the case was so high profile. Within a week, Amia was living in the Monroe house again. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Not really. Tiana was sentenced to 3 years in prison with a chance for parole in 18 months. In court, she asked her parents if they'd forgive her. Helen cried. Darnell nodded but didn't speak. They visited her once, on Amia's 2nd birthday. Tiana cried as she watched her daughter blow out candles through the glass. Helen whispered as they left, "We'll raise her right. You just come back better." Tiana nodded, pressing her hand to the glass as Amia smiled, unaware of the storm she'd survived.